Welcome to the Life and Other Data Sciences session. We got two great external speakers for you today. One is Sebastian from Alexion, and he will talk about building a clinically significant rare disease data master. And then Ken from Wave Life Sciences will follow, and he will show us how to use KNIME to build a data-driven culture in a biopharmaceutical setting. So I'm very excited for that. But first, Paolo and I will present what's new and cooking in KNIME Web Portal. Paolo and I are both data scientists and based in Berlin. Paolo is part of the evangelism team, and he will show us how to build and deploy a guided analytics web workflow on the web portal. And I am part of the life sciences team, so I will show a little bit more a life sciencey example, and I will show you how to customize components. Just a quick reminder, the KNIME Web Portal is a framework for building web applications. And the nice thing is that also Jim talked about yesterday, that all the workflows that you deploy to the KNIME server are automatically available as web applications. So you see here all this little, the components here, the building blocks, they are basically one individual web page. So they have a nice view that you see here. And then you can just do a step-by-step execution of those workflows from any browser. So that's very convenient. So how do you really then build such a view? For that, we introduced the components. Christian, but also Jim was talking about that, and of course also Bernd, and showed how to really build those components. Just as a reminder, again, those are building blocks of more complex workflows, so you can combine them and then build more complex applications. And they can have their own sophisticated view, which is then also a view on the KNIME Web Portal. And they can bundle an abstract functionality, so you can also hide complexity using components. And if you do, for example, a control double click inside of a component, then you see here that it's a little bit more going on, actually. And there you can just, for example, add views and so on, and those will then be represented on your web page as well. And the nice, great thing about components is that they can be reused in your workflows, and they can also be shared with others, right? So again, we have that concept that we don't want you to reinvent the wheel all the time. You can either build a functionality and then reuse it in your own workflows, or you can contribute and share with the community. And you can either share on the KNIME server or on the KNIME hub. And if you take all those together, so the concept of the components, that you can just use them and customize them, and then you can just build pretty quickly a nice workflow by just customizing those components. Then you deploy it to the KNIME server, and from there you have an easy analytical application where the domain expert doesn't have to know any KNIME, right? So the domain expert can then interact with the data without having to learn about KNIME in the first place. And this way we can again make use of the knowledge that the people have and build it in our own workflows. So now Paolo will actually show you how to do this.
All right. So I will now give you a All right. So I will today give you a demo of Guide Analytics with shared components. Here we go. And basically, let's open now the KNIME Analytics platform, and let's see how we can build such complex application, right? So here it is, the Guide Analytics application, and you can see here there is a meta node that is just hiding some complexity for us. Here we imported some data from the Erlang data set, which already Bernd showed you before, but you know, it's basically just lots of data about different flights. We have data about the airports, data about the different aircrafts, and it's about 28 columns. So we want to do something with all this data. And this is actually, if you go inside, is some really custom setup of data coming locally from the Azure, Amazon S3, and we join it and blend it together to finally get out a single table, with which we want to go ahead with our analysis. So like you already seen yesterday, a first step that I like to do when I start my analysis is to actually visualize the data, right? So what I can do is to go on the KNIME app, here we go, and type in here automated visualization. Hang on. Visualization. So it's already enough. All right, so this is the component I want to add to my workflow, and I can go ahead and add it. So right now, you can also do it from the page of the component. Whenever you see the image of the component, you can go ahead and drag it in. And this is actually a component that I created, and it's on my space. That means that, as you can see, I have made many workflows and components. They are shared here for people to reuse, and you could do the same, all right? So now we added this component to the workflow, and we can connect it. And we would keep on going, connecting more components. For example, we could connect this other one that is called interactive column filter. So we can go ahead and add it. Now, after you add all of those, you end up with a situation like this, right? Where you have a sequence of components that determines your web application. And also from the KNIME Analytics platform, you can interact with those views. So for example, we can open the first view, and you probably find this familiar, because this is actually coming from the field show yesterday that I repackaged for anyone to reuse as a component. And yes, we have the univariate column detection to see the interesting distribution for single features, double features, and we can interact with it and use it. And so we can also keep on going with this application, just that we want to make it remotely accessible. That is, that anyone also without KNIME can access these views and go through those steps. In this case, we are automatically visualizing data, then having an interaction to take out the features we don't want in our analysis. Then we are automatically training a bunch of models and selecting the best one. And for this, we need a dialog. So we want to select which models we want to train. In this case, I just selected really simple models. We can also add a neural network. And then we have the target column that we want to predict, and the metrics with which we want to evaluate those models. In those cases, binary classification. We can use area under the curve. And we go ahead and select it. And in the end, we have a single model that we want to interpret. So let's now do it as a web application available for anyone. So I go here in my local workspace, and I need to save first my workflow, and then I go here and I select deploy to server. And we can see here there is KNIME Server Summit I created. This is an instance on Amazon Web Services. It's a temporary instance we created, but this could be your own server on premises, on Azure, Google Cloud Compute, doesn't matter, right? It's where you install your KNIME server. So here I select, and I just decide to put it here on the main root folder of this workflow. And we can see here that now we are uploading this workflow to this cloud solution. And it's with the attached data in it, so it's taking a bit of time. It's little data, only 50 megabytes. All right, so now we can see that the workflow will show up here, and now we can directly get this link to access it. So I can go ahead and do open in Web Portal. Of course, it's remotely accessible, but you need to have credentials to access it, right? It's not that anyone can access it if you don't want to. So we are going to now quickly log in. It's a standard password. All right, and then now it's fetching our workflow, and in any seconds, we have this page with these start buttons with which we can start our analysis. Just a second here. And here we go, here we go. Always scared of live demos, right? All right, so let's start this application. So now we can wait, or we can actually go and see how the workflow is executing with our remote workflow editor. But if you're a business analyst, you just want to see this view executed. You don't care whatever workflow is happening here. This is now the step after automated visualization, so I didn't show you the same view, right? If we want to see this locally, it's also possible, as we could go here and locally open the same exact view from this same window. And so this is the local view, and the one I will show you is the actually remote view. So we can go ahead and follow our application. The first step we want to do is actually to filter some columns based on how many missing values, constant values. If any of you already seen the guided automation workflow, we'll find this view familiar because we reused it there. So for example, if we want to use only a few columns based on this column relevance, we would take the slider to the right. If we want to use more of them, we'll go instead with the left. We're going to keep this analysis to just a few columns, so we're going to keep it in the middle where you don't have too many missing values, constant values. You don't have columns that are too different, like row IDs and so on, right? And then we can also inspect single data points and decide whether we want to exclude a column or not with this checkbox. And we can look at single distribution. So I go ahead to the next page as we decided what columns we want to use. Now here we could actually wait and wait for the models to be computed. But something else we can do is to actually access the workflow that is now executing on KNIME server. So this is the view that it looks on KNIME server, and we can see that now we are training all those models. You can actually go inside and see this AutoML that usually is a black box. In the case of KNIME, it's a gray box, right? You can also see inside, this was the configuration panel we used before. Then we have the train and test split and the missing value imputation, the normalization. Then here we have an AutoML learner that is doing parameter optimization with all those models. And then we have the AutoML predictor that will score all those models on the train set. And then we are going to evaluate with the AutoML scorer the area under the curve, the accuracy, and all those metrics. It's taking a bit of time, but if you actually want to see also inside here, you can actually see all the models that are being trained. And currently, we're now training the neural network and the logistic regression. So it's at any seconds now, it should be done. So as the next step, we can then take the joiner node, take the trained models, and combine it with the AutoML scorer, and then select the best model here in the end. And then at this point, when we have a single predictor model, we can combine it with also the output here, that is the normalization and the missing values. All right. So should be done at any second now. All right, live demos, it's almost done. And here we go. So now it's scoring, again, the logistic regression. And we should now go see outside here. And then this part will execute at any moment. The next step after this is done is actually the interpretability view. So we train a model, any model, and want to explain how it works. It's actually this idea of model interpretability got popular intro. OK. I'm sorry.
So a nice thing now with the remote job view that you can actually do the debugging right away, right? You can just go inside and see, OK, what's going on, what's wrong, and then solve the issue on-premise right away.
All right. So we can actually that was the problem. It was my point that I select to predict the carrier instead of the delay of the flight. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but it should now execute in much, much faster. one single thing that you do not select, and of course it's still machine learning, right? I was trying to predict the airline given all those different flights. And there are many airlines in the data set. It's over 50 classes, and it's a bigger classification problem. So now we are computing the interpretability view, and at any moment now it should show this final view that is actually present here in the possibility to combine many different plotly nodes and standard nodes to browse explanations. There are Shapley values here, and we can, for example, here browse the different explanation by departure time. So we go here, and we can see that the models are using the departure time much faster. So we can, for example, select those explanations and see them aligned in the partial dependence plot. And a way to read this is, for example, that in this model, it will, as you see the departure time that is increasing, the likeliness to be delayed is increasing because flights at the end of the day are likely to be delayed rather than early in the morning. If you want to know more about how to use Shapley values and explanations and partial dependence and all this stuff, come find me after the talk because it is a bit more complex, right? It's about machine learning interpretability. All right, so this is actually my repository, but if Jeany also wants to show all the other nice components that we have on the public server.
Exactly, so what Paolo just used was from his private space, right? From his space that he shared, but also we at KNIME are providing components. So we are building components and sharing it with you as well. And of course, you can find them here on the hub. You see we have a lot of different categories for our components, starting from automation, but also simple data manipulation. Then we have components for particular data types. So for example, we have a lot of components for time series data, but we also, of course, have components for life sciences, and this is actually something that I want to use today in the example as we are in the life sciences session. So if I quickly go back to my slides and show you what my simple use case is that I want to do today, you see here that my goal is to cluster compounds based on their activity data on a particular receptor, the serotonin receptor. And what I want to actually do is I want to use those components from the example space to first extract data from the Campbell database. Campbell database is just a database which is manually curated and has bioactive molecules there and their activity, and you can find information about their structures and things like that. And then once I have extracted my data, I want to perform and visualize the clustering, right? So the activity data is basically just a numerical value, and so I can use that numerical value to perform a clustering and then see if those molecules, and investigate those molecules that maybe have a similar activity on those receptors of interest. And this is what I will do now. So here I already started with a little bit of the data extraction part, and again, this is from using components from the example space. So if I look here on the examples and then under components, I find exactly those categories that I was just showing you on the hub. And now I can see here in the life sciences part, I do have components that allow me to extract data from Campbell. I will cut that now a little bit short as we did some live bug fixing. But the take-home message here is basically I use those components to extract my data. I can also interact again with the component and then select only experimental data of particular experiments where I have a particular measurement. Then here in this case, it's Ki. And again, right, you can have that same view on the web portal where then the chemist or biologist can easily interact with the data without having to know anything about KNIME. One thing to mention here also is that the components we develop, we try that they really behave like KNIME nodes. So that means they do have proper error handling. So if you just use something, let's say no ID that can be found in the database, we will actually get information about that this was not a proper input. Plus we do have descriptions here. So similar to a normal KNIME node, you can just look at what that component does, and then you also have information about input and output and things like that. So I think that is very helpful for you guys, of course, to really adopt the usage of those components, and then you can just drag and drop them into your workspace. And this is exactly what I will do now. As I said, the next step, what I wanted to do is to perform a hierarchical clustering and also visualize that. And for that, I use the hierarchical clustering and heat map component. This component was also something that came out of a survey we did. So we really try to listen to you guys and to listen to your feedback, because we do have now these nice dendrogram and heat map visualizations, but the community said, well, it would actually be nice if those two can interact with each other, right? So if we perform a clustering, then we actually also want to sort the heat map according to that clustering. And this is exactly what's happening in this component. So if I execute that component now and open my view, I see that I have the compounds that I just extracted before and their activity data, and I now have the clustering here. And side by side, I have the heat map, and the values in this heat map are sorted according to the clustering. And now I maybe want to adjust that a little bit. So I want to add some additional information. We actually have a little bit of a tradition in the life science session that we always show molecules. And so that's actually what I want to do now. And for that, the tile view is a very handy visualization for that. And it's rather new, so it's nice to show. So if I type tile here and then I do tile view, I can now show the molecules with a little bit more additional information. I want to configure it that I actually show 3 tiles per line, and now I can also execute that in an open view. And now what I want to show you, actually a little bit of a take-home thing, is you can combine those views. So I can, from an existing component, I can create a nested component. So I can just select that, do a right-click, and then I create a new component. And of course, I can name it whatever I want to. Let's say in this case nested, because it has 2 components inside of it. I click OK, and now I do execute an open view. And what I see now is I have that dendrogram with the heat map plus the tile view. I can adjust the layout and things like that if I go inside of the component and play with that. We are a little bit short on time, so I will cut that short a little now, but you get the idea, right? So take-home message is you can drag and drop components from the example server, add views, combine that again into a component. You can share that component now again. You can deploy it to the web server and just go from there. So it's also a nice and easy way to customize your component. And then again, right, this is then, you can make it easily available as a web application. And that's also something we are working on actively to make our web portal more and more user-friendly. And this is actually something that Paolo will talk about now, a little bit what's next and what's cooking on the web portal.
Right, so let me, sorry, hang on. All right, so we are actually working on more nodes and components for Gather Analytics. So this one, for example, is Binary Classification Inspector, which gives you a way to compare many different binary classifiers from a single node. You just provide all the different predictions of those different models, and then you can actually browse them and see all this interactivity, how the confusion matrix reacts as you change the threshold and you find the best threshold of your model. So this will be useful also in the open source, but when you put it on the web portal, you can automate things much easier, right? Because you find a way to actually customize things quite a bit. But beside all those new nodes, interactive views, and Gather Analytics things we can do, the web portal is also will change its front end. That means that basically this will be a new look based on new UX design, based on new better performance. And for example, this is a workflow that you can see with this run button where you execute it. And then between two nodes, there will be a better feedback to what happens as you wait as a business user for the next view to show up. So this will give you feedback as the nodes are executing the background. And then, of course, you will be able to customize. And you have, for example, the possibility to use a black background and a lot of interactivity. So thank you. I think that now it's the time for questions. Yeah.
Me first? Okay. I just have one tiny question, maybe a tiny bug, if you guys will fix. So when you do this kind of, when you have tried to bring the the node to the following node, and you can actually, in the workflow, you click on, before you do it, you can click on the previous node, and double click the nodes in the repository, then it will bring up to a workspace and also align it perfectly. Right? But if you want to do the component, it doesn't do it. Did you guys?
So you want to open a component from the KNIME Explorer? That's
yes, from the KNIME Explorer in the left-hand panel, right? So you find a component, you double-click it, it will not. You need to drag and drop.
All right.
Yep.
This will be fixed.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the next release, this will be fixed. You will be able to add an open component. It's on development. You can find me after the talk so I can tell you more about it, okay?
There was another question here.
My question might be the dumbest one. We saw how to import the component into the analysis. If we create something and if we want to publish that, can you demo in a short amount of time?
I think we do not have time for the next session, but I can show you a demo at the booth outside, right? And anyone that is interested, it's quite easy to actually, just share them on the app, and they will actually be available.
Okay.
Bern already showed this, I think. So, but sure, I'll
Better
demo
to
for
repeat.
you.
Yeah, Ben showed it yesterday, but I think that's a lot of information, so we're happy to do that again. Absolutely.
There is a question here.
How are you gathering community feedback about which types of nodes that they'd like to see made in future releases, or which type of...
So can you get it closer?
How are you gathering community feedback on what type of components that they'd like to see in future releases?
Well, we have the KNIME forum, and also we have a bunch of events where we meet the KNIME users and we get feedback, and so we, yeah.
Anna also did a survey last year.
That's right.
Okay. I didn't know if you guys were doing pulse surveys or anything like that.
Yeah, so the hierarchical, that I showed the clustering, and that was actually from the survey that Anna did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just bought
There are questions.
Let's do last question.
Regarding the component sharing and working with the hub and the portal, is there a way to, I see a lot of value in that. Is there a way in an enterprise situation where you can configure that in the client so that it is restricted to read only, similar to the example server, so we don't run a risk of people pushing stuff out that we can't have?
There are, do you...
Go ahead.
So there are solutions for KNIME server. So in that case, you are sharing component via KNIME server, not via the KNIME app. And you can define permissions, who is able to access. And also there is the possibility to encrypt them if you don't want people to see inside your components. So there are different commercial features that come with KNIME server regarding components. Another question. Do we have the...
I would say we maybe continue the questions
All
later.
right? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Good.
Well-
Thank you all.